With the rising of the blood moon, a strange castle appears on a forlorn hillside. From within comes cruel laughter, while crueler creatures stalk its dread halls. Come with me. Together, we're off to the halls of the Blood King. Welcome, everyone. I'm Gary, and today we're going to take a look at an old school essentials adventure, The Halls of the Blood King. This is by Diogo Nogueira. Apologies if I've mispronounced that. I've only seen it written down, with illustrations from Justine Jones. And because we are interested in this, I think it's important to mention that the layout is done by Anna Urbanek. It's an official adventure for Old School Essentials. It's the second one that I've reviewed. And you can find the first one, Winter's Daughter, here to have a look at. This is a wonderful module, like everything that is put out by Gavin Norman for, officially licensed for Old School Essentials. It's a really strong theme. So let's just talk through a couple of things. There's 47 pages to the adventure, so it's pretty short, and you can read it in maybe half an hour, and get a good sense of it. Do you need to read it? Like, you don't need to read Winter's Daughter. Yes, you do. There's a bit more going on in this that it really benefits from having you read the whole thing first, rather than just trying to run it. Even though the descriptions were really good and it's laid out really well, it really benefits from you having read the whole thing. Now, a couple of bona fides before I jump into the through line. I've run this twice. I ran it first during the pandemic, using just a PDF. Pretty much, I think it had only been out maybe a couple of weeks, and I ran that online on Roll20. And I ran that for Old School Essentials, and that was wonderful. My players really liked it. And I've run it recently using this A5 hardback for a campaign of characters using my own Old School system, Journeyman Expert Master. In both instances, the characters were probably too high level for the module. The module is listed as 3rd to 5th level, but in all honesty, I think my characters they've been about level 5 or 6. And any game master worth their salt is going to be able to just kind of up the challenge where necessary. Now, there's not actually that much kind of definite combat in this, so it didn't really matter too much. It was very old school in its design in terms of encouraging players to use their skill, their sense of what they think, what is sensible, in order to overcome the challenges of the module. And there's a high level of role play, like social role play, involved in this particular module. So, what actually is the rundown? Well, there is a strange castle, the Halls of the Blood King, that appears somewhere in your game world, and this is a palace. It's kind of like reverse Ravenloft, like the mists dump this here. And this Blood King, he's implied to be the first ever vampire, or an extremely powerful vampire lord, and he's come to judge a vampire from the world. The module only exists for one evening. As in the halls only appear for one in-game world, so one in-game night. So they've only got one night to get in and get through things. I think in both instances, it took me one session to run the whole thing. I imagine that's going to be the same for most people, maybe 1 or 2 sessions, but it's not very long. And within these halls, there's strange Baroque magic. There's a vampire court. It's very factional, this dungeon, as I said. There's several factions, and I'll just give you the breakdown of all. So there's the blood spiders, which are strange vampiric spiders that dominate a portion of the manor. There is the vampire court, which is where the Blood King resides. That's the center of the manor. Around him is the kind of like blood court. All these really interesting NPCs, these vampires that are very different from each other for very different reasons, and they're really engaging to play with. All my characters and all my players enjoyed engaging with the vampire court. The vampire rebels, a group of vampires that are breaking off and planning a coup against the Blood King. There is the void fungi, which is very interesting. I'll come back to in a moment, which is an extra plane or extra dimensional fungi which has infected the manor and people don't know about it, and it's beginning to spread throughout the manor. And it wants to basically break out into the world and take over. It's a kind of parasite. And then there is the hunter, Selena. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. I said Selena, but on reflection, I don't think that's correct. I'm running it. And she is a vampire hunter who has found herself trapped in the mansion, having come in, kind of lost her way, and now she's a sort of prisoner who's boarded herself up in part of the manor. Really, really, really wonderful stuff. There's lots of cool, interesting ideas. And as I said in my in my Game Master tips for Yam-Shaped Adventures, there has to be a really strong theme for the best adventure. I said that here in this video. And I just think it's worth reiterating that there is a really strong theme here, a very gothic horror theme. And it's a gothic horror that borders on a very bodily, almost body horror. And what I mean by that is there is a sense of bodily invasion that comes with this particular module and the NPCs in it. So obviously they're vampires. These are characters that are parasitized living creatures. So that sense of invasion there. But there is also the void fungi. That's kind of invasive bodily. So that's quite interesting. That there's a kind of crosstalk between effectively these two not vampires, so these two parasitic factions that are kind of in rivalry with each other. And then obviously this castle itself has appeared in your world without much explanation, and that is invasive. So yeah, there is this sense of invasion, both bodily and literally, that I think is worth just communicating. I don't know if it's intentional, but it's something that came across both times I read it. Both times I ran it. And in the second time, one of my players actually commented on that. The artwork by Jones is wonderful. It's this really bright, rich use of color. It's almost comic book. It's weirdly prismatic, scintillating purples and blood reds that just make up the vast quantity of the artwork in this book. And it's just wonderful. There's so much stuff where you can show your players it. Now, I think it's evident to me both in the cover art and a couple of pieces like the one that I just showed you of the Demon Door that I don't think Jones had a copy of the map when she was doing the artwork, because there's a mismatch between the scale of some of the things that are depicted in the description and on the map based on how they're depicted in the art. But that's okay. It's just smatterings of things to give you a thematic sense of what's going on. And it is brilliant, this module. I'd really recommend picking up. So what did I like? Factions. Factions are really, really, really good. They're really compelling. One of my player groups allied with the Vampire Rebels, which I think is wonderful. There's effectively the Blood King has chosen a female vampire who is kind of his princess. He believes her to be his daughter, and she's plotting against him. It's like, oh, let's just got more of this. And they sided with her to try and oust the Blood King, and then she betrayed them, because I think that's what vampires should do. And then the other party, the first time I ran this, the party sided with the vampire hunter and helped her escape and helped her fight the Blood King. And it was a much more kind of violent affair. There's all sorts of strange things going on in terms of there's living blood. The walls scream if you cut them. There are these extraction rooms where people, where mortals are put in and their blood is kind of like mechanically drained out. It really reminds me of the end of the second book in Guillermo del Toro's The Strain series. I can't remember what it's called. I'll put a picture of it up here. Wonderful stuff. The mechanization of vampiric blood production is just disgusting, but really, really, really compelling. I would absolutely emphasize the blood spiders and the void fungi as interesting factions to engage with. The picture of the kind of spider mother is frightening as hell. It's just absolutely brilliant and very compelling. Reminds me of the brood mother from the first Dragon Age game, because I just think it's wonderful. Now, just like any good old school essentials module, and they're all good, all the ones that I've run and read and played, and every other layout is wonderful. It's something. Gary Norman, obviously the gentleman who oversees the line, is listed as a creative consultant here. Didn't lay it out. It was Anna Urbanek, but it is. I detect his hand here, because not a single room description is split over a page. So it means that you can wander around the table. You've got it. I love that it's A5. It's really, I'm not going to say it lays flat on the table like some people like to claim, but because it doesn't, but that doesn't matter. It's small enough that I can have it in one hand and I don't have to flip. It's wonderful. Really, really, really readable. Now, what would I change? What do I think is weaker about this module? Really nothing. There's just two things that are worth, I think, that would provoke thought for you to consider if you're going to run this. One, the room descriptions, like Gavin Norman's Winter's Daughter, are a few kind of like bolded words at first and then the main details. The problem is that I think sometimes the bolded words are not the ones that you want, actually. And for example, in the vine fence, and I'll put it on screen, you can see that 12-foot tall barbed fence is bolded, and then in brackets, rusty iron lacquered with dried brown blood. Actually, in Winter's Daughter, those secondary things that are in brackets that are made to seem less important here are the atmospherics. I'm probably going to use that with my players. I'm going to describe the fence as rusty and lacquered with dried brown blood. And then if they ask, I'll tell them it's 12 feet tall. Because in many ways, those practical details don't matter unless they ask about them. Whereas if I don't tell them and I just tell them the practical details, they won't be interested in that other stuff. It won't help me in any way. I'm not going to find an opportunity to point the camera at that in that detail again. So I just think some of those things are a little bit worth kind of considering. The descriptions are wonderful, they're really, really good, but just perhaps the way in which they are formatted is slightly inappropriate at times. And I don't like saying bad things because this is a really, really good module. And then the other thing I would mention is that it's the halls of the Blood King, but there's only maybe 2 halls in the whole module. What I mean by there's this huge circular hall that goes around the center, and there is one hallway upstairs. And I know that's a really, really minor thing, but what it does is, for example, with the vampire hunter, my players found it a bit of a contrivance. I could tell that they were struggling to accept that she was in this one room very close to the main core and had been there for a long, long, long time, even though she was a prisoner. And then there's all these different factions, but they are really close to each other. They're so close that if they put their ears to the walls, they could probably hear each other planning against each other almost constantly. So that is just something to consider. But again, I don't think that it is necessarily a bad thing. It's just something to keep an eye on. Now, the things that I absolutely adore, another thing that I absolutely adore is that you get really good reasons to come into this place. And something that I persistently complain about old school modules for is that there's not a good ending. Yam-shaped adventures come to a good point and have a reason to end. Now, it's not that Noguera gives us necessarily a reason to end, but they very helpfully give us a timer. If the players spend too long in the halls of the Blood King, one, it disappears, but there's also a kind of lesser timer at which point the vampires become enraged and they begin to just search out the characters and try and kill them. So they're on 2 timers. It moves things along. I've never had characters end up in the halls when dawn breaks, but I have had one party be in the halls when the vampires kind of go aggro and starts hunting them down and trying to kill them. Lots of hooks. These are the listed hooks: treasure, saving villagers, the princess's dreams, the elixir of life, and Celiana's vengeance. I would discard a treasure almost entirely. Not because treasure is a bad motivator, but I think it's a bad motivator for this particular module where there's so much social role play, where they go into the court and they're talking to all these different interesting characters and they're engaging with this factional role play. I don't think just encouraging your players to go, oh, you should go in there because there's loads of loot is that particularly helpful. I would actually I would say that they either need something from the Blood King, or they need to get someone out of there. They need to rescue someone. In both instances I ran this, I actually gave the party 2 reasons. One, the Blood King knew something that they needed to know, and that there was a magic item on the upstairs that they needed in their kind of like wider quest. So those 2 things were quite helpful. And actually, in one of the second time I ran this, I modified the hook slightly to give the player characters the ability to draw this castle to their plane for one evening. So they really were kind of like almost like a tactical SWAT team. They knew they had to go in, get their stuff, and get out in the time they had. And it was really wonderful. I think if you get this module, you are in for a night of brilliant fun, gothic, baroque, disgusting comic book, psychedelic, mad, frantic interest, social role play, encouraging narrative. I would recommend you go and get it. I think it's wonderful. Again, as ever, like and subscribe, do all that good stuff. But I do enormously appreciate you taking the time to stop, listen to me ramble on, and I'll speak with you again soon. Thank you.